Welcome back to this review of Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible. If you remember, we ended Act 1 with this dramatic climax, the girls all climbing on the bandwagon and shouting at who they'd seen with the devil. We spoke of how Act 1 had built up from the quietness, the praying at Betty's bed at the beginning, to that dramatic climax. And then we've had interval meanwhile. I hope you've been out for your whiskey, but left some space because there are another 2 intervals. And once again, the playwright's going to have to work very hard to keep your interest that at the end of this act, you're going to want to come back for Act 3. It's going to be a long evening, but he does a great job in making sure you want to come back for the next act. So once again, please imagine you're in the theater, the house lights dim. When the curtain goes up, the setting is no longer upstairs in Reverend Parris's house, but now the common room, the lounge, you might say, of Proctor's house 8 days later. So a lot has happened in 8 days that, well, you'll hear about it, but things have developed in terms of setting up a court now to deal with these accusations of witchcraft. Meanwhile, inside the Proctor's house, of course, these are the actors' right. There's a door, there's a stairway, it's a living room. When the curtain rises, the room is empty. And we hear Elizabeth singing upstairs, backstage. Shortly, John Proctor enters carrying his gun. We find out he's been out planting seeds on the farm. And there's this moment here, he goes to the fireplace, leans the gun against the wall, smells the pot, tastes, he's not quite pleased, takes out a pinch of salt and drops it into the pot, perhaps symbolic of some blandness in their marriage at this point. That's when she comes down. She doesn't see that he's added the salt to the stew. She's asking him where he's been. He's been planting seeds. The children are asleep. She's serving up stew. He's asking her how she is. I am well. There's perhaps a stilted quality to their conversation, and you know why. He had that affair with Abigail. Abigail's fired, but she's not quite recovered. So he sees what's in the pot and comments it's rabbit, and she says the rabbit just walked into the house, and yeah, she had to kill the rabbit and skin it. It hurt my heart to strip her. So she's got caring for animals, but she still had to do the job. It was food. Proctor says it's well seasoned, which is kind of, you could say a lie, but it's a white lie, trying to make her feel good when he's altered the seasoning. Tender, that's well, he says. The crops are good, they'll buy a heifer, a small cow. He wants to please you. It's hard for her to say. I know it, John. Why is it so hard for her to say? Of course, she acknowledges at the end she's been a cold wife. But yeah, one feels she could try harder because he gets up, goes to her, kisses her. She receives it, implying she doesn't really kiss back. That's why he returns to the table with a certain disappointment. Some coldness then still in this marriage. She's brought the food, but she's forgotten the drink, the cider. So he reminds her as gently as he can, trying to be nice. And she pours some. He's speaking about the farming. You ought to bring some flowers in the house, he says to her. The house could do with some cheering up. I forgot, she says. This is a good line to suggest this coldness in the house. It's winter in here yet, he says. And trying to be cheerful. She wants to speak but doesn't. And there's the stage direction here. A sense of their separation rises. That's for the director to interpret that sense of their separation. And Proctor says, I think you're sad again. And she doesn't want to cause a scene. She doesn't want friction. And yet she must. So she says, he came so late. She thought he'd gone to Salem. Of course, we know who else is in Salem. Abigail. I got no business there. She says, but you spoke of going earlier this week. He knows what she means. He says, yeah, I've thought better of it since. Mary Warren's there today. Of course, Mary Warren's supposed to be working for them. And he says, why did you let her go? You heard me forbid her. I couldn't stop her, she says. He reminds her, you're the mistress here. She frightened me. He says, how can that mouse frighten you? And she says, she's a mouse no more, because now she's suddenly an official of the court. She's important, so she's not so meek and mild anymore. This is Mary Warren, whom we met, the one that the other girls thought would be the weak link and would tell. Elizabeth's telling him about the court. 4 judges out of Boston. We're going to meet some of those judges in Act 3. Magistrates, deputy governor. Well, we're going to meet the magistrates, I think. Judge Hathorne. No, the judges, I'm right. She's mad. I would to God she would. And this is what's happened in the last few days. There suddenly are 14 people arrested, and the court has power to hang them. He says, they'd never hang, but he says it without conviction. In other words, he doesn't quite believe what he's saying. And she says, yeah, they promise hanging. If they won't confess, they're going to hang. And this is what Elizabeth says she's heard Mary Warren say about Abigail. She speak of Abigail and thought she were a saint. Where she walks, the crowd will part like the sea of Israel. And folks have brought before them. And if they scream and howl and fall to the floor, the person's kept in the jail for bewitching them. It's a mischief. You must go, she says, you must tell them it's a fraud. Because Abigail told him it was just the girls playing. So, yeah, it is surely. She reminds him, go to Chiva. He knows you well. Tell him what she said to you last week. She said it had nothing to do with witchcraft, didn't she? Yes, she did. She did. A pause. She's getting impatient. She says, God forbid you. You must tell him. Yes, it's a wonder. I would go. Let you go tonight, she says. I'll think on it. You can't keep it. I know I cannot keep it. Good, well, that you think on it. Very coldly hurt that he's not just agreeing to do it. He's thinking about it. And I guess she's thinking, is he trying to protect Abigail? He tries to defend himself. I'm only wondering how I may prove what she told me. If she's a saint now, it's not easy to prove she's a fraud. She told it to me in a room alone. And I shouldn't have said this. Because this makes her wonder, what was he doing in a room alone with her? You were alone, for a moment alone. And she says, why then? It is not as you told me. She says, for a moment. The others go, and this is the end for her. She's lost all faith in him. Do as you wish, then she starts to turn. And that makes him angry. Because he says, I'll not have your suspicion anymore. I'll not have it. And don't earn it. You doubt me yet? And she says, would you hesitate now if you're going to hurt anyone else? But because it's Abigail, you're hesitating. The big theme here about humans judging other humans. He says, yeah, you will not judge me. I got good reason. Stop judging. I've forgotten Abigail. He says, learn charity. And this is how he suffered with her coldness. I've gone tiptoe. And still an everlasting funeral marches around your heart. Still you're so cold with me. I cannot speak, but I'm doubted. Every moment judged for lies. As though I come into a court when I come into this house. You're not open with me. You didn't tell me the truth. You saw with the crowd. Now I'll plead no more. And he shouts again. No more. I should have roared you down when first you told me your suspicion. But I wilted, and like a Christian I confessed. So he told her the truth himself. Some dream I had must have mistaken you for God, but you're not. You're not. Let you remember it. Let you look sometimes for the goodness in me and judge me not. And that's really important because, in a way, it's what the whole play is about. At the end, I don't think it's spoiling too much to tell you, she manages to find that goodness in him. And she realizes by the end that she's not the one who should be judging him. She says, I do not judge you. And at this point, of course, she does still judge him. A nice line you can use, perhaps, the magistrate sits in your heart that judges you. She's the one who says it, but she doesn't act that way yet. She says she always thought he was a good man. And another line here with cold, he says, your justice would freeze beer. That's where Mary Warren comes in. He shouts, how did you leave without my permission? And she's still, now remember, a bit hoity-toity because she's an official of the court. She says, what are these proceedings? Why aren't you doing your work? My wife is not completely well. It's all something to do with the result of the affair. This is important. She brings a small rag doll, which they're going to call a poppet, to Elizabeth, and gives it to her. She says that she did it while she was in the long hours in court. She was sewing. Elizabeth is perplexed or mystified by this gift. Thanks her. We must all love each other now, in a very strange way that amazes Elizabeth because she's just acting weird. She says she'll get up early in the morning and do the cleaning and goes to sleep. Proctor checks with her. Is it true there are now 14 women arrested? And she says, no, it's not true. There are now 39 arrested. And she starts crying. Elizabeth asks, why? What ails you? Goody Osborne will hang. One of the first ones accused, either the prostitute or the beggar woman. He says, yes, the deputy governor's ordered it, but here's the rules. Sarah Good won't happen to her because she confessed. So if you confess, you don't hang. What did she confess? Yes, that she was in league with the devil, with Lucifer, and she wrote her name in his book. And Proctor says, but you know what a crazy thing she is. Did you tell him that? Yes, but she choked us all in court. She sent her spirit out. She tried to kill me many times. I never heard you mention it before. I never knew it before. And she mentions a time when she, even in court, that she heard a screaming voice and felt a clamp around her neck. To me, this is the theme that's coming out here is mass hysteria. I guess they're convincing themselves of these things now in court. She says what she remembers happening was she used to come to the door begging, and when she turned her away without giving her anything, she mumbled. And then Mary Warren said she had a terrible stomach ache. So she's implying this was a curse that was made because she didn't give her scraps of food, that Mary Warren had a stomach ache. And she said she's told them this in court. And they asked her in court, what is this that you're mumbling? And she said, yeah, that she mumbles her commandments. And they asked her to recite the commandments, and she couldn't think of one, that she was lying. What proof? That's hard proof, she says. Proctor says she can't go to court again. She said she'll be going every day now. That's what weighty or important work they're doing. Yeah, he says what important work that is to hang old woman. Goody Good is pregnant. She's an official of the court. He wants to whip her. Only when he wants to whip her, well, she already is refusing to be whipped. She won't put up with it. Elizabeth says, stay at home. The devil's loose. She says, I'll whip you. And it's now when he's really going to whip her, she points at Elizabeth and says, I saved her life today. Implying that Elizabeth was accused in court. Mary Warren said something to stop her from being arrested. And that stops him now from wanting to whip her. Silence. His whip comes down. Elizabeth says, I'm accused, mentioned. I said, well, she says, I told him I never saw anything like that. Who accused me? And she knows who it is. Mary Warren won't tell. But almost implying, say, don't be so funny with me anymore. Don't be so sarcastical. I sat to dinner with these important people. Go to bed. I won't be ordered to go to bed anymore. I'm 18. Then sit up. She says, I wish to go to bed. Good night then. And she goes. Elizabeth, knowing that it was Elizabeth it was Abigail who mentioned her name. The noose is up. She's out to get me, to have me hanged as well. There'll be no noose. She wants me dead. She wants you for herself. You dismissed it. And what if tomorrow she'll cry me out? She wants me dead. Sit down, we must be wise. Sarcastically, oh, indeed, indeed. Like being wise is going to help now. You should have been wise before you had an affair with her, is kind of what she's thinking. Fear nothing. I'll find Ezekiel Cheever. I'll tell him she said it was all sport, all a joke. He says, well, you'll need more than Cheever. Go to Abigail. What must I say to her? She says, there's a promise made in any bed. In other words, if you sleep with a girl, she's got the idea you're going to love her and spend time with her. What promise? A promise is made. She may dote on it now and thinks to kill me and to take my place. She wants to be your wife. It's her dearest hope, John. That's what she wants. There's so many other people she could accuse. Why does she call my name? And she's going to be saying now she's got a good reputation. She's not goody-good who sleeps in ditches, nor Osborne drunk. She dare not call out such a farmer's wife. She wouldn't mention someone with such a good reputation, except for the case that there be monstrous profit in it. She thinks to take my place, John. She wants to be your wife. He says she cannot think it. He knows it is true. That's the stage direction. She says reasonably, have you ever been horrible to her, shown her somewhat of contempt? She walks past you in church and you blush. I blush for my sin. I think she sees another meaning. I think she thinks, oh, he likes me, that's why he's blushing. And what see you? What see you, Elizabeth? I think you'd be somewhat ashamed, for I am there and she's so close. He says, when will you know me? She says, then go and tell her she's a whore. Whatever promise she may sense, break it, John, break it. Good, I'll go. Oh, how unwillingly. You don't really want to do this, do you? I'll curse her, but I'm going to be angry. He says, woman, am I so base? Am I so terrible? And how do you charge me with such a promise? He says, I see now your spirit twists around the single error of my life, and I'll never tear it free. You're never going to forgive me. And he says it was the only thing he's ever done wrong. Single error of my life. Yes, I'll get rid of it when you know I will be your only wife or no wife at all. She's still got an arrow in you. And perhaps that's true. That's when Mr. Hale comes on a surprise visit. But suddenly now there's a new attitude. He's drawn a little. He looks a little bit tired. And he looks almost guilty. Why? Because people are now marked to be hanged. Good evening. Come in. I hope I don't startle you. The first time he's meeting Elizabeth. Yes, what can we do for you? You're welcome here. Will you sit down? Have a seat. Some cider? No thanks. It's not good for my stomach. I got some business. I came here without the court knowing about it. Your wife's name today was mentioned in the court. I don't know if you've heard about it, and of course they have. Yes, Mary Warren told us. So that's why I'm coming out tonight, to find out more about those people who are accused. And I've just come from Rebecca Nurse's house, he says. And that's news to them and to anyone, because she's a good woman. Rebecca's charged, God forbid she's charged, but she's mentioned. Who, of course, mentioned her, Mrs. Putnam, eventually she's going to get arrested for murdering Mrs. Putnam's children. Elizabeth says, you won't believe that Rebecca trafficked with the devil. It's possible. He says, no. He says, well, there's evidence, there's powers of the dark. Even Proctor says it's hard to think that so pious, such a good woman has been secretly a devil's bitch after 70 years of such good prayer. Hale says, well, the devil's a tricky one, but she's not accused, and I know she will not be. And of course he's wrong. She will be. His real purpose coming here tonight has been to put some questions as to the Christian character of this house. No fear of questions. I see you're not in church so very often. And my wife was sick this winter, but why couldn't she come alone? I prayed at home. He says, your house is not a church. And another criticism of Reverend Paris, yes, so the Bible does tell me a house is not a church, but the Bible also tells me that you don't have to have golden candlesticks on the altar. Golden candlesticks. And Proctor mentions that that's been one of the things that Paris has been on about. He was moaning and moaning about golden candlesticks until he got them. This is not truly what religion's about. And when he looks to Paris now, looks at heaven and sees my money glaring at his elbows, sees the bloody golden candlesticks, it hurts my prayer. He says, yeah, but you're a Christian, you must be in church. But the children, only two are baptized. And he gives his reason. I don't want Reverend Paris laying his hands on them. He says, I see no light of God in that man. That's quite a harsh thing to say, but he has his reasons. And Hale says, yeah, well, he's been ordained. He's officially a priest, therefore he's got God's light in him. Proctor says he's the one who nailed the roof on the church. He hung the door. Elizabeth says, yes, okay, we've been a bit judgmental of Mr. Paris, but we don't love the devil. He asked her, did she know her 10 commandments? She says, yes, I know all of them. And does John? Yes, he does. Well, then repeat them. And John starts repeating them, and he gets to 9, and he can't think of the 10th one. He counts back, and then he says this graven image one, which he said over there already. So he repeats one, and Hale picks it up. You've said that twice, sir. Proctor doesn't know, and she reminds him delicately that the one he's forgotten is adultery. Ironic, because he's the one who's guilty of adultery with his affair with Abigail. Proctor says, yeah, well, between us we know all of them. It's a small fault. Hale says theology, religion, is a fortress. No crack in a fortress is small. Any crack can bring down the fortress. He says, we don't love Satan. He says, I hope so. Good night. I think you suspect me. Good night, sir. Now she wants him to tell Mr. Hale. I think you must tell him. What's that? And he does. I know the children's sickness had naught or nothing to do with witchcraft. He says they were just joking in the woods. They got a fright and they got sick. Who told you? Abigail. Abigail. I can't believe what he's hearing. Why didn't you come and tell us? Because I didn't know the whole world has gone daft with this nonsense. He says people have confessed. He says, and why not if they must hang for denying it? Can't you think they're only confessing? Because if they don't confess, they'll hang. Yes, I have thought that. It is his own suspicion, but he resists it. And he says, you'll tell this in court? Proctor says, yeah, if I have to, I have to. Proctor says, I've heard you don't even believe in witches. He says, yeah, I'm not so sure. I won't deny them. But Elizabeth says, I cannot believe it. Hale is shocked. You cannot. Proctor says to Elizabeth, Elizabeth, you bewilder him. How can you be saying this to him? He says, I can't think the devil can own a woman's soul when she keeps an upright way as I have. If you're a good person, the devil can't own your soul. And if you think that someone can only do good in the world and be secretly in league with the devil, I don't believe you. He says, but you must believe in witches. She says, if you think I'm a witch, then I don't think there's any such thing in the world as witches. You're going against the gospel. She says she believes in the gospel. Elizabeth says, go and ask Abigail Williams about the gospel, not me. Proctor says, oh, she's not doubting the gospel. Christian house. Hale's advice, yes, have the third child baptized, go you every Sunday to prayer, act a bit sober, but that's when Giles Corey appears with shocking news. They've taken his wife, they've taken Martha Corey, the one he said was reading books. And then Francis Nurse enters, also Rebecca has been taken. Good, pious Rebecca, who's been praying for 70 years. Rebecca's in the jail. Yes, Cheever came and took her in his wagon. They wouldn't even let us in to see them. Francis, can't you speak to them? Hale, calm yourself, Mr. Nurse. Francis, My wife, Rebecca Nurse, is the very brick and mortar of the church, Mr. Hale. And Martha Corey, there's not a woman closer to God than Martha. And we find out here what was the accusation of Rebecca for the marvelous and supernatural murder of Goody Putnam's babies. And even Hale says, yeah, well, if Rebecca Nurse is accused, then nothing's left to stop the whole green world from burning. Rely on the justice of the court. They'll send her home. They don't. Francis says, you can't believe can't really mean she's going to be tried in court. He says, yeah, the devil's alive, and wherever that finger points, we've got to check it out. How may such a woman murder children? And Hale reminds him that even Lucifer, until an hour before he fell from heaven, God thought he was beautiful. Giles says, I never said she was a witch, I only said she was reading books. And Hale asks exactly what was the story. That she said to Walcott, a neighbor, someone else in the village, this Walcott had bought a pig, and the pig died. And she said, well, if you can't feed the pig properly, you won't live to own many. And he now claimed because of her books and her curse now, he can't keep a pig, they all die. And now Cheever comes, the one who's come to do the arresting. And Proctor, I hope you come not on business of the court. Cheever, I'm afraid I do, I'm clerk of the court. And Herrick, Giles says to Cheever, hey, it's a pity that you're an honest tailor, now you've got to go to hell for this, for your involvement in all of this. Cheever says, yeah, I've got to do what I'm told. And says to Proctor, okay, it's a heavy thing I've got to do, but I have a warrant for your wife. Proctor says to Hale, you said she wasn't charged. I don't know anything. I was given 16 warrants tonight, she's won. Who charged her? Why, Abigail Williams charged her. Cheever says, I don't really like to search houses, but I'm going to search yours, or I don't want to search yours, so tell me, do you have any dolls, any poppets? And of course, we saw a poppet being handed over by Mary Warren. She's forgotten about it. She said, I never kept poppets. She says, yeah, I see one on the mantelpiece. Oh, this one, Mary's, give it to me. What's the problem with poppets? Any others? Cheever turns it over and he sees something, and he says, no, you better come with me. Go and fetch Mary. John says, no, I can't leave her out of my sight. You'll leave her out of sight. Go and fetch Mary. So she goes. And Hale asks, what does a poppet mean? And he lifts up the skirt of the poppet, and he finds something. He's going to tell us himself. It's a needle. What does this mean? You see, it's a needle. Hale asks, well, what does it mean? Tonight in court, tonight after court, Abigail Williams sat down to dinner and sat down screaming and then started screaming. And then they found a needle in her belly, and she testified it was Elizabeth's spirit pushed it in. And you'll find out in a second, she was sitting next to Mary Warren when Mary Warren sewed it. So she saw where the needle was pushed in, and that's where she put a needle in herself and screamed. So she staged all this to get Elizabeth. She'd done it herself. I hope you're not taking this for proof, Mr. Hale. Cheever says it's hard proof. I find a poppet, and in the poppet is a needle. They bring in Mary Warren. Proctor asks her, how did the poppet come in? Yes, she says she made it in court, gave it to Goody Proctor. A needle inside. I didn't mean any harm by it. You stuck it in yourself. I believe I did. Hale says, are you sure these are your real memories? She says, no, it's definitely, you can ask Susanna, or even ask Abby, who sat beside me when I made it. So Abby saw where she stuck the needle. Proctor says, well, that surely settles your mind. But it doesn't, because Hale's still asking, are you really accusing such a terrible thing on Abigail? Mary Warren says, no, I'm not accusing of Abigail. Elizabeth hears that Abigail's charging her, and she's very cross. So she says these harsh words, the girl is murdered, she must be ripped out of the world. And they take that as further proof that she's a witch. You've heard that, sir, ripped out of the world, Herrick, you saw it. Proctor snatches the warrant. Out with you. Proctor, you may not, dare not touch the warrant. Out with you. You've ripped the warrant. Out with you. Get you gone. Hale says, Proctor, if she is innocent, if she's innocent, why do you never wonder if Paris be innocent or Abigail? Is the accuser always holy now? Are you always going to be believing Abigail? I tell you what's walking Salem. Vengeance is walking Salem. They're using these accusations to get revenge on people. We are what we always were in Salem. But now the little children are jangling the keys of the kingdom. These girls are in control, the little crazy children. I'll go, John, she says. And Proctor says, no, you will not go. Eric says, I've got 9 men outside. Sorry, you have to go. Proctor accuses Hale of being Pontius Pilate, who, of course, wanted to wash his hands of the whole Christ affair. He's saying he's acting the same. Elizabeth says she'll go. She gives some instructions to looking after the children. Don't speak to them about witchcraft. It'll frighten them. I'll bring you home, he says. I'll bring you soon. I'll fall like an ocean on that court, he says. Fear nothing, Elizabeth. I'll fear nothing till the children have gone to visit someone sick. As they take her out, we hear the clank of chain. They're chaining her. And this upsets Proctor. Don't chain her. Damn, you don't chain her. Mary Warren bursts into tears. Hale turns from the door to avoid the sight. In a fever of guilt and uncertainty. Hale's starting to see this is a lot of nonsense. And Corey says to him, and yet, silent minister, you're still saying nothing about this. It is fraud. You know it is fraud. What keeps you, man? Why aren't you talking up? Proctor, I'll pay you, Herrick. And Herrick says, well, I chain all of them. I must chain them all. Hale tries to speak to Proctor. Proctor says, out of my sight. Hale says, well, I'll say what I can. Proctor says, you're a coward. Why aren't you speaking? Hale says, well, is there another cause? Murder. When there's such confusion in the world, I pray God open up our eyes. Hale leaves. The others are starting to go. And it's Mary Warren who says, oh, don't worry, they'll let her come home. He says, you're coming to the court with me. You'll tell it in the court that this was all a joke. I can't charge murder on Abigail. She'll get me back. She'll have me accused of something. He says, you will tell the court how that puppet came here and who stuck the needle in. She'll kill me for saying that. Proctor continues towards her. Abby'll charge lechery on you, Mr. Proctor. She will say that he raped her. He didn't even know she knew about it, and that stops him in his tracks. She's told you. I've known it, sir. He says, well, fine. I'll admit it anyway. We will slide together into our pit. You'll tell the court what you know. I cannot. My wife will never die for me. I'll bring your guts into your mouth, but that goodness will not die for me. I cannot do it. I cannot. Make your peace with it. Now hell and heaven grapple on our backs and all our old pretense is ripped away. Make your peace. He throws her to the door. I guess it's supposed to say not the poor. I was wondering what that was. And she's still going, I cannot, I cannot. And he gets to end the act with these big words. We are what we always were, but naked now. I'm naked. And the wind, God's icy wind will blow. The truth will come out. It'll be uncomfortable. It'll be justice. But at least the truth will be out. And she's still sobbing, I cannot. I cannot. I cannot. As the curtain falls. So that's what we've got to look forward to in Act 3 is what will happen in the courthouse. Will Mary Warren go? Will she be able to get through this? And will she and John be able to convince them? That's what happened with the puppet, and the whole thing's a fraud. But meanwhile, you can't find out just yet because it's interval, so time for another whiskey. So please go out to the foyer and enjoy your whiskey, and we look forward to seeing you back inside for